Okay, I think we'll get started. Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks so much for joining this Hospital Rooms Digital Art School workshop. This is our 6th workshop and we've been doing them every Thursday at 2 p.m. and we'll be continuing for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll have a new series continuing after that because they've been really successful and lots of people have been joining. We wanted to keep that going. This week's workshop is with Eileen Cooper. But before we get started, I just wanted to go through a few of the points that we need to before we start the workshop. The first thing is this session is being recorded, but all your videos and sound are off. So the only things that will be recorded are Eileen's workshop and the Hospital Rooms team speaking. There'll be a 10-minute version that Eileen and her husband have filmed, and we'll be putting that up online later today. So we'll send you a link to that after for anyone who wasn't able to join and wants to, or if you want to have a bit of a recap on the session. And at the bottom of your screens, there's a Q&A function. So if you want to ask any questions throughout the workshop, please do, and we'll try and ask as many as we can to Eileen. So we've got Natalie, and we've got Louis in the office, and they'll be fielding any questions. And even if you have comments or you want to say how you're doing, that would be great. At the end of the session, there'll be a Dropbox link. So we'd love to see your artworks. If you take pictures of the work you've made and share them with us, and we'll share them with Eileen. And there'll also be a survey, and we'd love it if you could let us know what you thought of the session. So Hospital Rooms, for those people who haven't joined us before, is an arts and mental health charity. And we transform inpatient mental health units with contemporary art. And we work with lots of artists to come into inpatient units. We do workshops, and we make these big one-off artworks for intensive care units, medium secure units, CAMS units, all different kinds of mental health spaces. At the moment, we're not able to continue with our projects, so we thought we'd start this digital art school where we could, some of the artists we're working with can share some of their techniques, some of the ways they work, and we can still be creative together. So Eileen Cooper is an artist working in paint, print and drawing, and her figurative artworks show the power, vulnerability, energy and magic in people and creatures. She's a Royal Academician, and she served as the first woman to be elected as Keeper of the Royal Academy. She was made an OBE in 2016 for services to the arts and arts education. And she said, I love the idea that the studio is the kind of place you might get a tiger walking through. And I think that's the perfect quote for today, as we're doing a big cat drawing, painting workshop Eileen's going to lead. So I think we'll have lots of amazing big cats at the end of this 45-minute session. So without further ado, thank you so much to Eileen for leading this session for us, and handing over to you, Eileen.
Hi, welcome to my studio. Yes, this session is called Big Cat, but the way I'm going to approach the drawing, it can apply to anything, whether you're drawing a vase of flowers or a self-portrait or a landscape. It's more about the activity, but I'm starting with a big cat, and it'll probably be a tiger. No artist works straight from imagination. It's a lot to do with things that you've absorbed over, in my case, decades. So I want to show you some of the things I start with, and I always have them by me. Sometimes I don't open the books, they're irrelevant because I've looked at them enough. Other times I'm seeking new sources, so I'll look on the internet, or I'll look at films, or I'll listen to music, and record titles are a good one. I did a painting called Till the Morning Comes that was after a song. So I'm going to start now. This is a book of copyright-free illustrations. Lots of artists and designers use it. I've got lots of things here. I've got drawings from Disney. I love cartoons. I particularly love Lady and the Tramp and these 2 Siamese cats, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. So I take from lots of different cultures and, as I said, lots of different media, whether it's film, photography, poetry. I've been involved in a charity called Young Art, and looking at the things that these children between the age of about 6 to 16 have been drawing is completely inspiring. And this front cover of this last catalogue with the big tiger, I think is particularly rich. I don't know if you can see it, but here's another cross between a tabby cat and a tiger. This one too, I have to show you, which is one of my favourites. The mother and the baby cub. So I sent out a PDF, which I hope you've been able to download. And some of the things that I selected were new to me, and I discovered them for the first time. I'd always loved Roger Hilton's work, so that's not new. I love the sheer energy of it, and he was probably very poorly when he made these pieces, and I think he made them in bed. Lots of gouaches at the end of his life. This very famous painting of a tiger by Henry Rousseau has always been a touchstone for me. And I've recently discovered this ceramic cats by Hilton Nell, which, you know, if I could own one of those, I'd be super chuffed. I'm going to keep this one with me. Alan Davies' Improvisations for a Tiger's Tale. I've always been interested in his work, and it was nice to find out that he'd also been inspired by tigers. So these are things I'm going to have around, and one of the things is I often move backwards and forwards from lots of drawings, so I've been drawing all week in preparation for this, and I might show you some of those later. This is something I did quite early on in 2007. This was very much inspired by this book of tiger rugs, and some of the images that we sent to you on the PDF are of tiger rugs. So, even though I've got all these amazing things around me, this beautiful Korean cat, which is just spectacular, and this gorgeous book with these amazing pictures in it, I'm actually going to start with something very simple. I've got my cat mask as well to keep me company. Good source of inspiration. But I'm going to start with this illustration from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The illustrator is John Tenniel, and I think it was in 1865 that the first book of Alice was printed. And I did a bit of research, and I think Lewis Carroll was inspired by the idea of the Cheshire Cat, and he didn't invent it. But a bit of detective work, it seems that he lived quite close to a couple of churches with cats' heads carved on the outside. So I can't quite get this simple little cat out of my mind, but I think I'm going to make it a tiger. And also when I was researching, I came up with some nice quotes, which I might talk about later. Okay, so I've got all my favourite things around me. Now I have to start. And probably not look at them anymore. Thinking about that one, I'm going to do a cat in a tree, a tiger in a tree. So I'm going to think about the edges of the paper, and quite closely related to this wonderful Cheshire Cat. But my tiger's going to be at a different angle. It's almost going to be part of the branches. I'm starting off in a very light charcoal because it's incredibly flexible and you can rub out if you want to, or pencil. Any materials that you want to use that you feel comfortable with. For me, when things go wrong, I often add more and more materials. So I might start off with charcoal and pastel, and then if it goes wrong, I'll use a wash. I spoke to an artist called Elizabeth Blackadder once, who makes wonderful drawings of cats. And she said that when her watercolours went wrong, she stuck them under the tap in the kitchen and washed them away. And then the residue of what she had left was brilliant to start back with. I constantly rework things. I'm going to have to probably at some point shut up and concentrate a little bit. But even though I'm drawing a tiger, I think, as I said, anything that you want to draw, it's the same principle. Find a way to start, maybe find images that can be your, as I said, touchstones that you can have by you to work with. That's in the wrong place. It needs to be a much bigger, much more rugged tiger, with maybe with claws. Maybe there's not enough room for my tiger in this tree after all. Maybe. So it's partly imagination, it's partly having reference material and just the confidence to make something that's, I don't know, not got too much resting on it. You know, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work. It's only a piece of paper. You can easily rip it up, work on the back, as Elizabeth Blackadder did. Put it under the tap and wash it away with its watercolour. There's the tree as well. Trees are very important to me and the natural world, flowers. I've got lots of books on botanical illustration, but now for you, anything's available for a younger generation and older people like me on the internet. I've drawn from Instagram, drawn a friend's cat from Instagram. iPhones are great because you can zoom in on things. You can see that I'm using the colour very, very randomly. It's more to, I think, perhaps
on
just
that,
get rid of the paper.
sorry, Eileen, on that note of your references that you look at, someone has asked what the name of the book of copyright free illustrations you used was.
Dover Publications, they've got dozens of them. You can find them on the internet. As you can see, I've had this a very long time.
Yeah, it's very well used.
Sometimes, actually, in other artists' work, I can recognise the illustrations that they've worked from. So there aren't any secrets. Very hard to work completely in a vacuum. But you can see I'm not really looking at my illustrations at the moment because I spent all week drawing tigers. None of them brilliant, but sorry, I'm looking at the wrong camera. Apologise.
That's all right.
Right, think, Eileen, now. So let's put a bit of this tree in to give it a sense of place. When you're working imaginatively, or when I am, I often have this conversation with myself. What's the context? You know, where do these people, creatures, where do they live? And often it is in the outside, but sometimes it's also more of an interior, symbolic, sometimes an interior space. With pastel, you can really not be precious and work it very sensuously. You can tell I'm a bit frightened today and I'm perhaps avoiding my tiger. I had a wonderful old cat and it often modelled for me in the early days when I first started to use tigers. The simplicity of the tiger rugs really did speak to me. And the first time I saw this exhibition of this work was at the Hayward, a long time ago. Now you can see I'm being a bit braver with colour. If I was working away on my own, I might start something and put it down, start another one, and I'd be working on 2 or 3 together. And that's the way I approach my paintings. I get to a certain stage and then I leave them. Let's concentrate a bit. Otherwise, you're going to think that's a completely pathetic drawing. Oh, what colour is a nose? I think I probably distort things, and I'm probably the first generation where televisions appeared in our homes. I can remember seeing Popeye and Top Cat, wonderful Hanna-Barbera productions. And the thing I love about cartoons is it makes the impossible possible. So somebody can run off the edge of a cliff and they keep running, and they're in space. You can tell I'm not very worried about getting things exact, but like a cartoon, there's got to be a sense of truth there and possibility. I want people to understand what I'm trying to say. And I think art for me is, as well as being a means of self-expression, very much a means of communication. But again, I don't really know what I want to say until I've saying it or until I've drawn it. And I mentioned that I'd done a bit of research about Lewis Carroll and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, triggered by this cat. And of course, it's quite philosophical, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. There were some good quotes, and one I thought was particularly relevant to creativity. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, which I feel is exactly what I'm doing today. And the other one, begin at the beginning and go on till you come to the end, then stop. Not a lot wrong with that. So let me get back to this cat. Perhaps I'll mix it up a bit. First of all, I'm going to do the eyes. Make them very bright. Got kind of whiskers as well, really. Tigers, as have cats, lots of hair around the side of their heads. Right, I want to be very precise now. And I love ink because it's so emphatic. It's quite terrifying if you let it terrify you, but as I said, it's only a piece of paper. And often the things that go wrong or are difficult, I think, are the best things. Certainly my best paintings are ones where I've always got lost along the way and had to find a way to, well, resurrect a painting that's gone pretty bad.
We just had a comment, Eileen, saying that's a very wonderful solution to when things go wrong.
Good.
So.
Yeah, the fact that it can be a real positive. And actually, if I'm being honest, the paintings that don't go quite so wrong are never really the ones where you discover a lot. The difference between a drawn mark and a painted mark is obvious here. But I like mixing them together. Painting on solely in oil or acrylic is quite different, because the drawn mark, you don't get an absolute equivalent when you're painting. Maybe with a dry stubby brush and dry paint, you can get a kind of drawn mark. But that's why I love graphic works on paper. I've recently done some illustrations for a book, which I'm going to be, they're going to be producing next year. I'll let you know about that. Enjoying those ears. Got a bit of a tiger feeling. How are we doing for time?
We've got another 20 minutes.
Oh, good.
So you've got plenty of time.
Because I had an idea, which now I've got room for it, I think, which I wanted to do in another drawing, and I didn't have enough room, so I'm going to add something in a little while. You can tell that I'm pretty random, really, where I'm putting these marks. And perhaps they've got more now in common with the Roger Hilton or the Alan Davey, that the marks are existing in their own rhythm. Yeah, I love that Alan Davey. I wouldn't normally have these things quite by my side when I'm painting. I'd lose myself in my own world, but it seems much more relevant for you because I want you to try and enjoy it and have some backup if you need it. In the Rousseau as well, he's so passionate. He's done so many tiger paintings and he's so passionate about the jungle around them that I thought I might use a bit of that. So it's good to put things to one side and come back to them if I'm really seriously thinking about those leaves. Maybe it's a time to start now. So also I think sometimes when you're not thinking about the main thing you're drawing and you're working elsewhere, then somehow you're assessing it and come to terms with it and think what's working, what's not working. I think he should have some sky.
We've got another question of your reference, Eileen.
Yeah.
Who's the ceramic artist?
Who was the ceramic artist?
Yeah.
Hilton Nell.
Hilton
He's
Nell.
South African. And yeah, a new discovery for me. They're really wonderful.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
One of the things that might not be obvious in a short drawing workshop is the sheer amount of time an artist will spend on something and coming back to it, restating it and changing it. Well, that's my approach, but I know that some people want to be very immediate. Another beautiful quote in the Disney book was somebody said, if I've got time, I will do a very detailed drawing. What did he say? Something about the difference between a very detailed drawing, but what he actually wanted to do was a very simple drawing. And probably a very simple drawing takes more time than a very detailed drawing. I think you can tell that I'm not terribly worried about getting things right, but out of that, I do want a rightness. I had this idea that I might have a sleeping figure there, because another thing I looked at a lot in the Rousseau, which is in the 10-minute version, is this. What is it? Ah, I love that. Sleeping musician. So I love sleeping figures. And I'm going to put it away, but I'm going to think of adding a sleeping figure, which wasn't in the workshop at all. So feel free to ignore it. What I meant about restating, don't worry about getting things wrong. They usually get better if they go wrong, like a lot of things. And this isn't a recipe. This isn't a how to do. This is a possible approach. And here are some materials that you might find useful. And I think it should be joyful. Sometimes that's not true when I'm working and something's going wrong, but I do get a huge sense of satisfaction eventually. Tell that I don't really know what a cat's claw looks like, but those claws are getting bigger. I'm happy for more questions if you've got any.
Yeah, if you've got any questions about materials or inspiration or sort of anything related to the workshop, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll ask them. Regina has asked if you can add the sleeping figure.
I'm adding it now. Under the tree in safe keeping, being looked after by the tiger. I'm very connected. This is more my comfort zone because I've always been drawing figures all my life. Animals I find more difficult actually. I suppose it's a sense of feeling I've got about, especially the female figure. Make this little foot over there. Haven't quite got enough room for the toes. Oops. I wanted to talk about Comté, which I love, which I think is either, it's not compressed charcoal, it's probably a form of graphite. It's very intense, but you can still get rid of it. That was another thing that always annoyed me when I was a youngster. People said, oh, don't rub out, as if that was a rule, you shouldn't rub out. But I was quite happy to get rid of things occasionally, like this tree root. So I'm going to put her leg back in. I'm going to give her a bit more shade. What colour should I use?
Eileen, we have a question here asking about what kind of pastels you like to use.
Oh, that's such a good question. These are Unison and they are very soft and dense and easy to move around. I find oil pastels much more difficult, but then there are always new things on the market. There's a lovely set of pastels which you can use watercolour with, and they're very subtle and very beautiful. And lots of these things are not expensive. Obviously this is a big set, this is a big outlay, but these are the tools of my trade. So really, I've got to spend some money on them. We could do a workshop where actually you could say, oh, add this, add that, add a bowl of fruit. That's quite a good thing to do, to be directed. What I mean about, I know I restate constantly. They don't always improve, but often it's a bit of a key to something. You keep reworking them. More of these leaves. Now in 45 minutes or whatever amount of time we're spending on this, you working at home and me working here, or wherever you're working, studios, workshops, hospitals, you can go back to things to make them much more subtle. So this very raw mark making here in the sky, I know that if I wanted to just build that up and rework it and be careful about the edges, I could make this a much more sensitive picture. And it, you know, if I was going to spend all day on it, probably I'd do that. And sometimes when that happens, you think, God, that was a mistake, and want to get back to the raw energy of it. Quite fascinated by hair, roots of trees. They're things that I'm always on about in my work, and you know, from time to time they disappear, a bit like a tiger. I wouldn't be using it every day, but you know, 2 or 3 years later I'll feel that that's an appropriate image. I don't even know why.
We've had a question in, Eileen, asking when do you know when to stop?
So that's such a good question. I often take a break, sometimes for days, and then you can see it more clearly, and the things that annoy you begin to really annoy you. You think there's no point in leaving that. I'd rather wreck the whole thing than leave it slightly unfinished or slightly awkward, or maybe it's got too detailed, you need to strip it back. So that is, what did Lewis Carroll say? Begin at the beginning and go on till you come to the end and then stop. So that's not very helpful. Or maybe it's incredibly helpful. So I don't know if I've answered that question. What does the person who asked it think? Right, we should think about this tiger again now. That's nice, where it smudges a bit with the ink. Don't be frightened of smudging things. Maybe he's becoming slightly more realistic. This is probably going to be very open-ended, and I doubt if it will be finished. I like folk art. I suppose that's obvious from the things I've got around me. That's a Japanese mug full of images of cats. And then, as I said, this beautiful cat stroke tiger from Korea. Let's find these whiskers again. Anything, I think, is legitimate source material. There aren't any rules. Folk art for me is as important as, you know, so-called high Western art. I much prefer things actually that are predate perspective. No, it's not looking very good, is it? Let's see if we can get a bit of weight and volume in there.
So I think we have had an answer from that same person who question, Eileen. And they say, I find it very difficult, but like you, it's good to have space away from the work and come back to it later. And they've added that you're a delightful facilitator, which I'm sure everyone agrees with.
I'm very honoured to be here.
I'm sure you don't normally have people encouraging you as you're painting.
No, it's quite nice actually. It could be the future. This lay's completely mashed, so I need to. The other thing that you would often do is step back and have things upright, which is a big help. I've noticed that all this around her is left now, so I'm going to make that quite dark, and so she's in the shade, quite mysterious. Maybe over her body as well. Cover her up with colour. Maybe she should be wearing something. So that's feeling of a night sky coming in on top of her. Now the night sky, I feel, is taking over a bit. It's a nice feeling. Make it darker and richer. Or maybe that period. I said you ask yourself questions about what you're doing, where is it, what do I want? And often just through engagement with materials, as is happening here, those questions begin to be answered. I think we'll give her something to wear, just so she's got wrapped. So she's wrapped in something. We've covered her up. But I still want the sense of the body through the blanket or the dress or whatever it is she's got on top of her. Let's do that face a bit now. Where's my brush going?
I don't know if you know them, Eileen, but we've had a question about the names of some of your colours.
Ooh.
You just know them as orange and blue and yellow.
Yeah. I mean, I'm quite this is Y11. I'm quite extravagant with them, buying colours. I'm always, so when I'm printmaking, I have a very different approach to colour, because you have relatively few inks, and if you work with printmakers, they're the most amazingly accomplished people at mixing any colour. Whereas as a painter, I'll probably have at least half a dozen reds, from a dark cadmium to maybe, even if I could afford it, cadmium orange, and then some cheaper colours to mix in with them, and then a whole 2 or 3 browns. I know I could mix brown easily, but so I've got not probably the best approach to colour. But I was part of a generation who went to art school and benefited from free artist materials. Can you imagine that now? We were so privileged. Maybe she's got a bit of the tiger in her. Maybe she should have a stripy blanket. Oh, that's the wrong mark. Make that little hand. Make it go little sleeping figure. So I only had the idea about adding a figure when I was drawing the cat. Probably inspired by that Rousseau, the thought just wouldn't go away. And they're the best creative ideas if you think, God, I can't draw that. It's just a ridiculous, banal thing. Why would I do that? But then that idea won't go away, and they're the ones to follow through on, I think. And that applies with whether you're a professional artist or you're just doing it for your own pleasure, or you're beginning, or whatever stage you're at, to follow your instinct. And I think that's what makes people quite unique in their work. We're all using the same imagery, essentially. But following your instinct will make yours sing out. And that's such an example in all these children's pictures. And they're, you know, completely wonderful. Look at that little, much better than mine. Happy to answer more questions. Slowing down a bit now. Probably this, in order to tie it together, I should use more black ink to maybe make that much more of a secret place. This tigers in a secret
place. A question from me, Eileen, but how have you found creating work during lockdown and sort of making work at home?
I'm incredibly lucky because I've got a home studio. So that didn't feel very different. It seemed, to begin with, you know, like, oh God, what on earth is going on? Why would I, you know, do something as trivial as, you know, get into my, you know, make some pictures? But it was actually an escape for me to lose 5 hours in the studio most days in the week, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, and not engage with it too much. Because I felt so useless, really. And there were so many, you know, far more heroic examples of people making amazing contributions. But in the end, my work, it's just what I do. And I wasn't particularly assessing the value of it. But what did begin, because I'd spent quite a few years making drawings from direct from people, portraits, which was a new approach for me. And obviously I didn't have anybody coming to the studio. So I felt I could return to that more imaginative approach, and maybe this is part of that, just letting it flow without too much restriction. And I've been using other animals as well. done some pictures with a bear. I've never used a bear before. So they're really hard to draw. I don't know if that answers the question, but no, I'm incredibly lucky. And also, you know, I'm at the age where I've been to enough parties. It doesn't matter if I never go out again.
Good attitude. We had a question asking whether you prefer to paint the darker or lighter colours first when you're painting.
Ooh, probably instinctively light, because if you're going to change it a lot, it's pretty hard to get rid of really dark colours. But then sometimes one of the things I love about Max Beckmann's work, who's a figurative artist from Germany that lived between the wars, I think, is that he'll get rid of 90% of a colour, but the remainder of that colour, so say blue on top of pink, the remainder of that colour will be showing through, so he'll get value for the colour that didn't work and that he changed, and the paintings shimmer in a way. And he, like me, he uses a lot of dark outlines. If that made any sense. Not doing very well with these whiskers, but we just need to. Got about 5 or 6 approaches to them now.
And just to let you know, Eileen, one of our participants, Regina, who's made a few comments, is joining us from New York at the Creative Centre there.
Oh, wow.
So, international broadcast today. It's great to have you guys from New York.
Amazing. Thrilled by that, completely thrilled. I was also very pleased that quite a few of your units were in the north of England, because you might notice a bit of a northern twang in my voice. I've been a Londoner for a long time now.
I think we're coming to sort of the last 5 minutes or so of the workshop. So if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask before the end of the session, feel free to put them in the Q&A.
I might stop. Oh, I could show you my other work that I did, a bit like Blue Peter. These are ones I did earlier. Nothing as sort of typical as, maybe that is quite typically me. Things that I've taken from parts of my past. That's one thing that when you've worked over many years, you have a store of images and you don't want just to churn them out. They have to be relevant. So sometimes they lie dormant for a long time. Yeah, so you can see how I started off.
Someone joining us from Cumbria today. They've just said hello from Cumbria.
Great. Oh, how fantastic to be up there at the moment. Yeah, you can see that was a very quick attempt. I think that's the one I did in the 10-minute, 20-minute thing. My first ever leopard. And another one, which to me does look very Disney. You know, just stepped out of an animated film. Probably I should go back to some of these, and proper pussycats. That wasn't a very good one. That would be something that I'll use as an example that has gone, you know, just isn't working. So you need to really attack that, because, for instance, the length of the nose is so wrong.
We've had a question, Eileen, where someone's asked what you do with the pieces that you aren't happy with.
Well, sometimes I really do destroy them, especially if they've been kicking around for a few years. Quite hard to destroy big canvases or paintings on board. Easy to destroy prints. I've destroyed a whole edition of prints once or twice. I think the thing that I learned from printmaking is to think in layers, and also you're going to have an edition of maybe 20 of these. So you've got to spend a lot of time getting your original design, your original drawing right, and then hopefully make it better through the process. Yeah, I really love what printmaking's brought to me, and also working collaboratively, because it can get quite lonely working on your own, no input, too much listening to the same music again. When I go up to Glasgow Print Studio and print with them up there, one of the things I always enjoy is that I'm always listening to new music, somebody else's choice. Yeah, sorry, I should stop now. Any more questions?
Just on that subject of collaboration, we did have a comment saying that it's nice to draw along with you, and it feels like we're all working together. So
fantastic. Where is it? There we go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eileen. That's been brilliant. I think we're going to hand over to Tim just to sort of close us out, but that's been brilliant. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Eileen. That was a magical and quite special 45 minutes. And I hope everyone's been able to draw along with Eileen and make their own amazing big cat drawings. Just a reminder that we'd love to see them, and we'll share any of your artworks with Eileen if you put them in our Dropbox. So you'll get a link shortly that'll send you the link to the Dropbox. We've also recorded the session, so the full session will be on our YouTube channel, and we'll send a link to that too. And Eileen and her husband Malcolm have filmed a really nice shorter 10-minute version. So anyone who wasn't able to join in today, you could always see that much shorter version, which will just give you a sort of really nice overview of that session if people could join in after. And there's the last thing is the survey. We'd love it if you could take part in that survey. And it's also nice to hear where you're taking part from. We did a bit of a heat map a couple of weeks ago that showed that we had people from all over the country, but also in lots of other countries, from South Africa to Australia to the USA to different parts of Europe, and we'd love to keep in touch with you. Natalie, is there anything else that I've forgotten?
Just to say that we have 2 more sessions coming up over the coming weeks, so if you're not signed up for those, we'd love to have you. And yeah, there'll be an email that will come through from Eventbrite with all of the links to the Dropbox, and the survey will be at the end of this session when you leave.
Yes, and the next session is with Ryan Mosley, who's a painter, and he's in a show at the Whitechapel Gallery at the moment, and he's going to be doing a workshop about how you plan a mural. So there was a lot of units who've been in touch with us saying we haven't been able to work with them, but they wanted to figure out ways that they could plan their own murals. So that might be a good chance to think about how Ryan approached his mural for a unit that we worked with last year. So thanks so much for everyone for joining, and we hope to see you again next week.